Do it.
Oh, you have to accept the recording. Oh,
I'm
wow.
afraid the lighting is very low. Okay, so everybody, iedereen die wil zien wat er hier aan de hand is. Misschien een beetje opschuiven als je het niet kunt zien. De mensen die iets willen vragen, gebruiken de microfoon. Vanaf daar horen ze jullie niet. Yeah? Here we go. Let me see. Yeah. Shall I introduce everybody?
Sure.
Yeah, why not? Right? Okay. Well, not everybody, but we here in Holland, in Kuitaart, of all places. They say it's in the middle of nowhere. It's actually not, but that's what we think. We have, how many people do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21 people do we have in the room. Woo! Big hand to yourself. So on the screen, as you can see, we have Tara on the left upper, and in the middle down, we have André.
Hello.
Yeah. She's a she, as she is put there. Tara, she, her. I think André, you are he, him. Is that okay for
he,
you?
him, they. Yes.
Yeah, he, him, they. Okay, well, there you go. The floor is yours, Tara and André. Thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to what you have to say.
Well, thank you so much for having us. What a wonderful idea to bring together friends and family and talk about all of this wonderful things that are unfolding. So happy to be here.
Yeah, so happy to be here too. And what an honor to be invited to talk to you. We are coming to you from Canada. I'm right now sitting in Toronto, Ontario, and André is in Hamilton right now. We're a smaller town, Dundas.
Right, so we are worlds away and yet still very connected to you by this marvel of technology. And it's hopefully in 6 months, if we should do this again, we'll be meeting you in person. So that's quite exciting. Yes, and you're always welcome to come visit us in warm, loving Canada. Not so warm, but loving.
Yeah, it was quite cold this morning when I got up. I was like, wow, 3 degrees or something. I don't know. Anyway, we know that I think it's a mixed crowd of family, friends, maybe lovers. And so we thought we would give you guys a little bit of a brief introduction about what polyamory is and consensual non-monogamy. And then we'll open it up because you guys might have some really great burning questions to ask. Right. So brief overview, we'll try not to make it too academic. How's that sound?
Sounds good. So why don't we start with a couple of definitions that might be helpful?
Sure.
And we're going to speak in broader terms, and these are generalized. I think one thing to note also that's important is that very often we might have a definition that most of us might subscribe to, but there might be interpretations or understandings for people, and they might have their own definition. So these are not absolute, but they are terms that we try to use so that we understand whether or not we are understanding each other, right? So they are not perfect, but they are descriptors. And they are often in themselves, very often evolving. So we will look into that and we'll see how that goes. But these are kind of just rudimentary bases to go from. So we'll start with consensual non-monogamy. So consensual non-monogamy is an idea that we are in a committed romantic relationship where all partners consent to sexual and romantic ideas with other consenting people. And the biggest part of that is really that it be consenting, right? Because sometimes what we have is only one person consenting in a non-monogamous relationship, in a monogamous relationship, and only one person consenting means that they are deciding for the other person. And it is known as cheating, right? So we are having an affair without the knowledge of the other person. In consensual non-monogamy, we are all adults consenting to participate in this. And that is really the biggest part. It's also very often called ethical non-monogamy, right? Because we are consenting. It is with ethics. It is not as though we are cheating in it.
Yes. Awesome. And so within consensual non-monogamy, there's a number of different flavors, types, relational identities, you might call them, that fall into them. And one of them is polyamory. And I think it's probably one of the most common terms I think that people think about. I think it comes from, what did we say? Oh, Greek.
It's Greek. It's a Greek word for many, and
Mhm.
amory is Latin for love. So many loves together create polyamory.
Yeah.
Right? And it's interesting too, because as we'll also see, when we speak of amory, when we speak of love, there's many different ideas or understandings of love. It may be a physical love, right? Sexualized, erotic, and it may be an emotional love, which is at times non-erotic. It might be asexual, but it is the idea that we have some emotional investment, some level of interest in the other person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. For sure. And also some people within polyamory might also have different definitions of what they say, whether or not they're in love with someone versus just having a good connection or friendship or that sort of thing. So that leads us into the question that always comes up, and that some of you who may not be as familiar with it. Is it always about having sex, or not wanting to commit to someone, or wanting your cake and eating it too? So I think the simple answer to that is no, and everybody does it differently. But I love, André always has really great analogies to share about, how it sort of works in terms of like why people want to be in consensually non-monogamous relationships. So which one are you going to share, André? He always has really good ones.
You're thinking about my tennis analogy?
The tennis one, or remember we were just talking about pizza?
Oh, and pizza also. Okay, so a very quick one. I guess, if people are like, well, how could you love more than one person at the same time? A very, very simple, easy way of looking at it is, well, if I asked you what your favorite food is, you might say, for example, pizza. Okay, so you love pizza, and that's wonderful. But we are not limited to just loving pizza. We might also love ice cream at the same time. So our love for ice cream does not stop our love for pizza. We are able to love those at the same time. But I guess the more practical model to this, another analogy that is very good, is as if we were playing a game of tennis. So, for example, Tara and I, we start to play tennis together, and I say to her, Saturday was a wonderful time of playing tennis. Would you like to play tennis again on Wednesday? And she says, yes, that was fun. So let's go again on Wednesday. And then Wednesday was good. And I say, well, how about next Sunday? And Sunday we play again. And all of a sudden we become kind of regular. We're playing tennis and we're having so much fun. I say to her at one point, Tara, I love playing tennis with you so much. I would prefer that you don't play tennis with anybody else. It would seem rather absurd, right? Well, in many ways, it is the same thing. We put up this model of monogamy and say, well, I love you and I would not be able to understand or tolerate if you should love anybody else. I want to be your everything forever and have you only think to me that way, which is kind of setting ourselves up for an unrealistic idea that we should be the end all to everybody. It puts a lot of pressure on ourselves and on the relationship. And what we're suggesting is that we could survive this. I could survive her playing tennis with somebody else, and that she would come back to play tennis with me because she wants to play tennis with me, not because she's under any kind of marital contract or any other kind of ideas, or that it be immoral. She can go and she can come as she pleases, and she chooses to be with me, and I choose to play tennis with her. Mm-hmm. So that's one analogy.
Yeah, so that's how some people, why people do polyamory or open relating or consensual non-monogamy. Now, having said that, there's nothing wrong with monogamy, and we're not saying that it's wrong or you shouldn't do it or anything like that. If it's something that works for you, then that's amazing, because for some people, they just want to interact and relate with one person, and that's awesome and cool. So we don't want to say that, but
right. Exactly. We're not suggesting that poly is better or monogamy is worse or any of those things. It is simply what might work best for you. So I was in monogamous relationships before, and it did not work well for me. And I thought that there was something wrong with me. I was trying to adjust myself to that model, but that model did not work well for me. When I allowed for this other expression, I see that it really works well for me. The other idea is that when I go out, or when Tara goes out and sees somebody else, we are getting stimulated by that other person, sexually, physically, whatever, but emotionally, romantically, intellectually, it adds something to us and makes us feel as though we, in many ways, have more opportunity, more facets. We're more complete in that sense. But again, it is not the idea of one being better than the other. It is simply that they might both be acceptable. So much of this may not be for us. We may not be the kinkiest person or the most vanilla person, but we are accepting of it. So it's a lot in polyamory about inclusiveness. You might not want all of it, but we try to resist the judgment or the rejection of others, even if it's not what we're wanting, because we are, at the end of the day, consenting and wanting this or not.
Mm-hmm. Well, you may be wondering why we're not in the same location. And the part of the reason for that is because André is there in Hamilton, Dundas, with one of his partners and someone he loves very much, which is amazing.
Yeah, you're a metamor.
Yeah, my metamor. Ooh, what's a metamor, André?
Well, a metamor is, Arzu happens to be my girlfriend, but you don't have a primary relationship with her. You don't have a direct relationship with her. So by proxy, you are related to her. And we call that type of relationship a metamor. It's in not quite in our polycule per se. There's a great light that's coming through right this way. I'm on fire. Hope it's not too distracting. But anyway, so a metamor is a way of identifying the relationship. It's part of the dynamics in that relationship.
Mm-hmm. The partner, like simply the partner of your partner.
The partner of your partner. Well said. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I have a boyfriend, Jeff, and so Jeff is André's metamor. Mm-hmm.
And it's fantastic. It's fantastic because we are all very open with each other, and we happen to be friends. It's not a requirement, but it is adding to the depth of it. But it also really indicates how secure we feel with each other. So I'm not threatened by the idea that Tara has another lover or friend. I know that it adds to her experience of being on this planet. And it makes me feel very happy for her. I have compersion for her.
Oh, compersion, another term.
Another great term. So
is anyone writing notes? Because these may come up again.
Well, that's okay. It's registering. But compersion, if you've not heard of that term before, Tara, can you tell us a little bit about what compersion might be?
So compersion is when you feel happiness or joy for someone else's joy and happiness. And it's often used when people talk about open relating or consensual non-monogamy as like this ideal that I would be joyful and happy for André having other partners and having fun with them and that sort of thing. Now, having said that, the interesting thing about compersion is because some people put it on this pedestal, they often think there's a myth, I believe, in consensual non-monogamy and polyamory, that in order to have a successful polyamorous relationship, that you have to always feel compersion. And I think that's, for me, is definitely a myth, because I feel that it's not always possible. Like sometimes we feel jealous because we see things in our partner's partner that we maybe wish of ourselves or that sort of thing. So I think when we work with people and talk to them about jealousy, because that jealousy and insecurity is often the common thing that comes up for people, we talk about how can we move from a place of being jealous and overwhelmed to a place where we're at least neutral. But compersion's amazing if you can get it.
If you can get it. But we shouldn't in any way fault ourselves if we don't necessarily have compersion. And because we are plastic as human beings, we do change over time, and we do change over scenarios and situations, right? So we might feel rather secure at one point and then be surprised sometimes that we feel jealous in a certain situation. Mm-hmm. It's not that we might not change again. So we are in flux, we are open to it. But what we want to do also is we want to remain in touch and introspective with our feelings so we can identify what those feelings are, figure out where they come from. And then say, for example, with jealousy, we can identify what the components are and find a way to minimize its impact on us. It's not to say that we might not ever completely eliminate jealousy, but how will we be affected by it? How will we be able to still integrate into relationships and feel less threatened by it?
Mm-hmm. And the other thing to note too, I guess, is another myth is that like people who are people who are polyamorous experience more jealousy than insecurity. And I think that while there's situations that come up for that, I think at least in our situation, like André and my situation, I think that I'm much less jealous now than I was previously when I was in monogamous relationships, because I've released some of those bounds of ownership or feeling that my one partner has to be one thing.
I think that's a good point, Tara. Yes, absolutely. So in the poly model, I have a sense of security because I feel as though you could and you do go out on occasion, but then you choose to return to me. And that gives me a sense of validation. It makes me think, well, she could be out and she has gone out, but she decided to come back. Whereas when I was monogamous, I was subscribing to this idea that you and I would only be the people together, and that if anything should ever happen to it, well, then where would I be left? So it was, in a way, a greater opportunity for jealousy in that sense, if I thought that you had any feelings. And also because when I was monogamous, I was not as transparent with my feelings. We did not talk as openly about them. And being poly, it's not so much just about the sex, it's about how we communicate with each other, the openness to it, so we can feel secure and we feel as though we are doing what is comfortable for us, what is natural for us.
And I think that's one of the things that works amazing about you and I, André. We've been together for 4 years, and I think right from the start, and I think I'm going to attribute a lot of that to you, given your background in therapy, that you're used to communicating, and I feel like I got to learn those skills as well. And it allows us to be able to talk about all the things. And we've changed our relationship. Like when we first started, we were one thing, and we've evolved over time, but we continue to talk about it, see what's going to work for us, what's not going to work, and then like, what are your yes, nos, and maybes now, and then how does that evolve? So reviewing those agreements, or how you define your relationship over time. So for example, I was just going to give an example. If you had told me 4 years ago, when André and I first met, that I would be okay with André going away for an entire week to Mexico with his girlfriend, I would have told you were like crazy. Like, there's no way that I would be okay with it. Yet it happened. We survived it. We learned from it. And here we are, right?
So, but it's not to say that everybody's ever going to want that as well.
No.
We find out what it is we're wanting and not wanting, but the key really is being transparent, being ethically open about it, so we can communicate, and then we can make a decision, an informed decision. Is it something we want to participate? We give our consent, or we say, you know what, that's not for me, and we retract our consent. So that is one of the biggest, most important parts about being ethically open in this, about being polyamorous, is that it should be done in a very considerate and transparent way.
Yeah.
All right. You'd mentioned also about how it had changed over time. Why don't we talk a little bit about the different styles of open relating? So there are many ways of calling this, right? So some people call it being polyamorous. Some people refer to it as consensual non-monogamy. Other people might call it ethically non-monogamous. It's saying polyam is kind of the umbrella term for all of these ways. And in that, as we see, there are different components. So if we look at the lower left-hand side, for example, there's something that says swinging, right? Mm-hmm. So swinging is, in a way, a form of polyamory, in the idea that we are, perhaps we'll use the example of it being two people, they're in a couple, and they both agree, they're both consenting to go out, and they will act or interact with other people, but it is primarily considered to be an erotic, sexual, physical relation. There's not a whole lot of emotional exchange there, and that is part of their agreement. They go out, they may go to a club, or they may go to a party, or wherever it is, and they will swing that way.
Yes, and often we definitely have done swinging ourselves, and and we still do. So I think we are kind of like a blend of a lot of different things, and you don't have to be one thing.
Right, you don't have to. Yeah, you don't have to choose it, and it may change over time. You may start off swinging and then say, you know what, I'm actually really liking this person. For example, Tara and her boyfriend, Jeff, have a very strong emotional relationship now. So it's gone well beyond just swinging, and it morphs into something else, but we might be swinging with other people. So it's not as though there's a one size fits all, or you have to make any kind of choice, but hopefully it is a choice that is well informed, and becomes informed by talking about it, by being open about your feelings and your desires, what you're wanting and what you're not wanting. And hopefully your partner or partners are also able to express that in an open, loving way.
Mm-hmm. And the purpose of this diagram is, so this diagram is from Jessica Fern's Polysecure. I actually have that book with me right here. It's a really good book if you haven't read it, where she talks about like a lot about attachment styles, but different types of relationships. And, you know, these aren't all of them, but the idea of this diagram, which I think is cool, gives you an idea of like a range of where you might have high to low sexual exclusivity, and then from monoamorous to polyamorous on the other side. So you can see where monogamy is. So monogamy is high sexual, and I'd say romantic exclusivity, and then also high emotional exclusivity, and also monoamorous. And then you move all the way to the bottom corner, relationship anarchy, if you're not aware of it, that's where, you know, it's like everybody's equal. There's no levels, there's no nothing. And it's basically you don't have any sexual exclusivity or romantic exclusivity, and no polyamorous, completely polyamorous. So there's kind of a range of things, and it's kind of interesting to see where they fit and where you might be. So some people are monogamish. So they're mostly monogamous, but maybe sometimes they have other partners. But it's quite different than swinging, because there's still primarily a high sexual exclusivity.
Right.
And then I think the only other, I'm going to stop sharing because there we go. The only other one that might be helpful to describe is like the different types of polyamory, from hierarchical to non-hierarchical, and then solo polyamory. And then there's being asexual and polyamorous. Should I go?
Yes, please.
So hierarchical polyamory is where there's a situation where you have multiple emotional or romantic partners, but there's someone or a person or one person that has a different, like a higher level, or it's more like a level of importance. So I mean, and another term is, people would say they have an anchor partner. So I would say for us, André and I, would you say that we're hierarchical polyamory, or?
At times, and I think most of the times we probably are, because of the situation that we often will be living together. We will often cohabitate. So that also, people might say that we are nesting partners, right? We build a nest together, we live together. But I think that for many people who are already coupled and monogamous and starting off, they very often have what would be considered their primary partner. They may be married, for example, and it is almost a given that that will be their nesting partner, who's their primary partner. But that might change over time. And for example, if they were to have a different type of relationship with, say, kitchen table, they might still be in a hierarchy, but they'll invite other people in where there's less importance or less emphasis on that hierarchy. But the hierarchy, I think, also goes to the idea that because you have already an established relationship with this person, there is a consideration. So for example, in practical terms, when you are wanting to date other people, scheduling becomes an issue, right? So you might want to go on a date with 2 or 3 other people, but how are you, in a practical sense, going to schedule them in? And you find times, but there's a consideration that because you are with your primary partner or anchor partner, nesting partner, whoever it is, that you might consider how they might get a priority in picking dates together. And you do that so that it is a collaborative effort, right? So we're not simply caught up in our new relationship energy, our NRE. So when things are new, we're very excited. We want to go to that person, we give them a lot of time, but then the person we were with before might feel kind of left out or abandoned or neglected. And that's not what it's about. We want to be considerate of them. So it is just something to keep in mind, a way of going about it.
The other term I wanted to mention that you may hear and that some of you may be involved in, for those who are consensually non-monogamous is polyfidelity, which is like, usually it's where there's more than two people. There's a group of people that are interacting and having romantic or sexual relationships with each other. But it's more of an exclusive. It's kind of a closed, it can be a closed circle. So there, it's poly because there's multiple, but it's a closed circle. So for example, you may hear the term polycule. Now, having said that, as it's coming out of my mouth, I'm seeing that I know that some people have polycules that are not exclusive, not closed. So sometimes there's open polycules. So you may have people within that interact, but some of those people may also have other partners outside the cule. So like we said, lots of different definitions, lots of different ways of relating to people in a way that's consensually non-monogamous.
You know, and as you said, there's a lot of different nuanced ideas to this, and there's a lot of overlap. They may bleed one into another, and they may change over time. And there is no right or wrong way to do this. But the thing that I would want to impress upon you the most is that it should be open. It should be ethically open, and it's open in the way that we communicate our feelings to each other, the generosity that we have to listen to each other, the understanding, so that we might both find out what it is we're wanting and not wanting.
Mm-hmm. And,
So
you know, what was that? Sorry?
No, that it be ethical, it be considerate and open, as opposed to simply taking what we want by, you know, cheating or being unethical.
Right. And I think, you know, sometimes, you know, this is where the openness and the communication is sometimes where people have trouble, because we're not necessarily taught to be really good communicators and to actively listen and that sort of thing. So I'd say one of the common things that both André and I work with when we work with people, couples or individuals, is on communication, and also like really saying and being honest about what you want. Because sometimes when things are new or we're imagining a different way of relating to our partners, it's scary and we're afraid to tell our partners, but then we keep it inside, and then resentments, and then like the whole thing, right? So, you know, this is the area, some of the areas that we work on with people. But I think we've talked a lot, though. What do you think, André? Should we?
I think so.
Should we take questions?
Yes, please. Yes, questions.
Oh no! I hope we
I have the microphone. So, okay.
I'm going to view it so I can see.
I can ask questions, but I don't have any. Anyone who wants to ask a question? You have a question, Barry?
Or add something to what we've said?
Yeah, or add.
I have a question. Hello again, Tara and André. We met last night. My name is Barry.
Hi, Barry.
Yes, hi, Barry. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing very well. How are you?
Good.
Fantastic. I had a wonderful day of preparing stuff and getting things set up. May I start by saying you both look amazing. I really appreciate the effort, because it shows that you made an effort to look well on screen tonight. I wanted to know one simple thing. In your relationships that you have, Tara with Jeff and André with the girl that you're with at the moment, and you have this relationship with each other, do you have pet names for each other? And do you use those pet names, or do you feel comfortable using the same pet names with your other partners?
Oh, that's a good question. Do I have a pet name? I definitely don't have a pet name for Jeff. Oh, but he does have a business. He's a real estate agent, and he's called the Village Guru. So sometimes I do call him the Village Guru. So nobody else gets called the Village Guru.
Yeah, but that's kind of specific. Do you have a pet name for each other? Yourself and André?
Tara and I, do we, Tara, have pet names for each other?
Well, sometimes we call each other, like, I don't know, like.
I used to tease you quite a bit. You used to call me asshole, and I like that, actually, right?
You call me kitten.
I call you, kitten or sex kitten for sure. And I call Arzu Azizam, which is a Persian term for deer. But I don't think we transfer that onto each other, or do we? Do I ever call you Azizam, Tara?
No, but you call me Arzu sometimes.
Oh, that's true too. Yes, mostly when I'm annoyed.
But
if I get upset, I'll call you by her name.
But you do the same to her. The same thing.
Yes.
You call her Tara when you're annoyed.
When I'm annoyed, I will call her by your name, is true.
Yeah. Ours is there. Is she listening in the background?
No, she went upstairs. She's doing something else.
Okay.
Just before I go back to sitting, just before I go back to sitting down, I wanted to let you know, I've been in a relationship. I had been in a relationship for 22 years with the mother of my children, and I met another lover, who is Suzanne, who you've met as well, and I call them both Babe, and for me, it comes completely naturally, because the love that I put in the word Babe that I had for Elaine, I still apply the same emotional charge to the words.
Yeah.
So it's like a gift I'm sharing.
Thank you for sharing that, Barry. I love that. Babe is such a beautiful and endearing term. And I might tell you that I used to call my girlfriends Babe, but I did it for a much darker reason. And that's because before I was open, I was dating many people at the same time, and they didn't necessarily know about it. So I would simply call them Babe because I might forget their name, or I might just, make it as these things. I was just, hey, Babe, like, what's going on? But it wasn't with the same beautiful intention as yours.
We do sometimes call each other Babe, though.
Well, that's true. We do. It's a term of endearment, right? But now I've tried to rally against not doing it because of my association from the past.
I'm gonna go and park it. Thanks again for a wonderful speech, guys.
Oh, no.
Thanks, Mary.
No problem. Oh, the other thing we used to call each other, because when we first met, we thought that we hit the jackpot. So I used to call him Jackpot, and he used to call me Jackie Pot.
Yeah, Jack and Jackie Pot. That's true.
Jack and Jackie Pot.
Okay, that was the first question. Iemand anders? Yeah, okay, Alex.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Hi, Alex.
Hi, Anne. Thank you for the great speech. It was really inspiring and nourishing and very. It's not that my eyes were not open yet, but it opened my eyes a bit better. Let's say. But I have a question. So, how do you configure yourself in a polyamory relationship? No, sorry, I'm gonna be very unstructured and not clear. How do you find your place in a polyamory relationship? Whether there is like a first core. I feel that maybe there is like a core of like a someone who has like already a very strong core of polyamory relationship, and maybe you satellite around that core. And how do you find your place, and how do you address how you find your place there?
Okay.
Is my question clear?
I think so. I'll say it back to you and tell me if I got it right. So I think what you're asking is, when there's a core, like where there's a couple or more than two people that you consider a strong core, and you're the satellite, that maybe the solo polyamory, or you're coming into that relation, how do you navigate it? Is that what you're asking?
Exactly.
Okay. Can I ask, is this a situation you're in or considering?
Probably.
Okay. That's an interesting question, because I think it totally. Did you have an answer, or André, or should I just kind of?
Please go for it.
I'll start and you jump in, because I think it depends on the core.
Right.
So it's interesting, the use of the word core, because that implies that the other person is an other. And I think this is the situation I think that people often have the hardest time with. And they say that if you're single, especially if you're a single person, that you're considered a unicorn, for example, and that you are secondary and of less importance than the core. So, I mean, I guess there's a decision there. If it's about the openness of the people that are in that core. How are they including you? And do you want to be in a situation where there's a very strong core? Like, how do you fit in? And I think, I mean, the simple answer, I don't know, Andre, is that it's like communicating. It's like, what does everybody want? And making sure that your needs are met and that you're able to voice how you feel within that situation. Like, how do you want to be included? How do you want to feel a part of it? You know, because I think it can sometimes feel that you might be on the outside. Were you going to add something there, Andre?
Yeah, it makes me think back to threesomes and jealousy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're absolutely right, Tara, about being perhaps feeling as though you're the unicorn. It depends on what structure you're going into, what structure they have as their core. So I can remember one time this idea of a threesome, and it was the two people as a couple. They had a strong core. They were already established in a couple. And then I was the third person, and I was not in that core, and I felt outside of it. And it made me feel less than. It made me feel insignificant and a little jealous of what they were getting, and I felt I wasn't getting. But also, my expectations were unrealistic because I thought that it was going to be very equal. And how could it be? Maybe it could if we would have explored it. But the thing is, we didn't talk about it beforehand. So my expectations, my receiving into that was completely from my own perspective, without the insight or knowledge of how I was going to be integrated into the core or not integrated into the core. Had I known, had they had said, well, we only want you for this much, I would have managed my expectations and understood my part in their core. Mm-hmm. Or they might say, well, we are wanting somebody who is well integrated emotionally, and we're inviting you into the core. So I think a big part of it, again, as you said, Tara, is the idea of communicating. So very often it seems as though it's easier to talk about what kind of kink we might want or what kind of sexual interaction we want, but it seems less viable or less open to talk about the emotional part we might want. And that's often where the ideas of our jealousy comes up, our feelings of attachment or insecurities come up. So if we can be really transparent and being open and honest to talk about our feelings, say, well, we're looking for somebody to, be emotionally connected with as well as a play partner, then we have an understanding of that. Or they say, well, no, at this point, we're really just looking for somebody who is, X, Y, or Z. We know about it, but we only know about it by talking about it. So I would invite you to really try and speak openly and honestly with whoever you're going to participate with on whatever level, whether it is the emotional, the sexual, the erotic, all those things. But Alex, I love your question. And I think that this whole part tonight is wonderful because it is doing what I am doing as a sex positive psychotherapist. It is the attempt, and Tara as well, the attempt to normalize this, whether it is, as you say, monogamy or poly, or whether we are straight, gay, queer, whatever it is, the idea that no matter how you are, no matter where you are in the spectrum, it is part of the human sexual experience, and that too is normal, and it is acceptable. So you might not have found the right core, but that's not to say that the right core doesn't exist for you. Talk about it, identify your feelings, and invite it, and go out and get what you want. And don't settle for things that you're not wanting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the common thing that happens is if there is a strong, like, primary relationship, a couple, is that it may feel like they're making all the rules, they're setting all the agreements, and sometimes they're not communicating that. And so you want to ensure in navigating this sort of situation that you're part of those discussions, you're part of those agreements, there's part of those decisions around how you're going to relate, and do you want to be just with the couple? Like, sometimes the couple say, well, you can only be with just us. Or do you want to have relationships with each person if it's two people, right? Like, do you and I want to have a relationship that's friendship, sexual? Do you want to have one with André? And do you want to have both of us? So, like, what combinations of things do you want, and what things do you value? So it's important to know what it is you value going into a situation, and then, talking with them and figuring out if you can make it work.
But
so it's all about communication at the end.
Yes. So much of being polyamorous, of being open, is about
so easy. Could have been
more about communication than about sex. But Tara, you talk about being the one person in that couple, and it would appear as though the power dynamics are stacked against us. But actually, sometimes the unicorn, the third person in this scenario, could have more power. They can decide whether or not they want to participate. They can decide, right? So we empower ourselves in that position. So it might on the surface appear like it's 2 to 1, but really we are going to decide which part we're wanting, and that's self-empowering, and we can decide how much power we're going to have or not. But it's not to take away from threesomes. They're a wonderful, fun thing, but to alleviate that, especially in the beginning, I think, from my experience, and correct me if you think the same, Tara, is that being in a foursome or being in an orgy or things like that can really shift the power dynamics and make you feel as though you are kind of more on equal footing as far as the power dynamics.
Mm-hmm.
Something to think about.
Yeah, and I was going to say there's also a difference between a threesome and a triad, for example. So if it's a triad relationship that somebody's wanting, rather than a unicorn and a core, you want to determine if that's the thing. Are we going in just to have sex and fun and threesomes and that sort of thing, or are we wanting like a triad where there's more of a connected relationship?
Right. And it's about the only way we would really know what we're going into is by communicating. And there's one other thing that we've not mentioned that is critically important to me that we do mention, and that is talking about STIs, sexually transmitted infections or disease.
Totally.
Right? This is a conversation that we have with all of our partners from the very get-go. We are strong advocates for not only talking about STI and testing, but about going for it. So we feel, this is our personal thing, that we have a responsibility to the community. So if I have herpes, if I have gonorrhea, if I have syphilis, I must refrain and stop and take the test, inform my immediate partners, and let them know it is the ethical thing to do, and it is responsible to the others and to ourselves. So please speak openly about this, normalize it, and do the responsible thing. And then when you have that good health card, go out and have as much fun as you so desire. That was my public service announcement.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your answer. Very inspiring.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you. Anybody else? Even in Dutch, in Nederlands? Dat mag ook. Dat vertaal ik wel. Nog vragen? Oh, sorry, Maarten.
So thanks a lot. It's been very interesting so far, Tara, André. A question comes to mind for me is related to children. When children are involved, what is the right way to communicate with them about, this change that may occur, right age? They don't need to just normalize it for themselves, I think, but also with respect to their classmates or whatever their social circle is, right? Or, would you suggest that they not speak about it at all? Or I'm just curious, what's your experience and recommendations on that part?
Okay, well,
that's a great question.
It's a great question. Actually, it's interesting because I was thinking, oh my God, like I wasn't doing active listening. I was like, what am I going to answer? But I did hear your whole question. We have an online community called Let's Talk Polyamory on Facebook. And through it, we met this amazing woman who does sexual education. And part of what she does is talking to parents about how to introduce sex, kink, and other, like polyamory to kids, and at what age you tell different things. So I'm not going to remember all the information that she said, but if you do want to, I think you guys have the link to our group, but if not, we can share it. We can figure out a way of sharing it. But we did a great talk with her, and she talked about this topic in particular. But I think the big thing that I took away is again, normalizing this. And I think for her idea is that you start talking to kids early about sex and relationships and introducing people like these are trusted people in our lives. It depends on how much you want your kids to know about your relationship. They certainly don't need to know, that you're having sex and orgies on the weekend if you don't have them all the time or whatever, or if you do it outside the home. But if you do want to introduce partners to them, talking to them about this is a trusted adult that, is important to me in my life, just as another adult might be. I'm Andre, did you have something to?
I think I think that was a very good, concise answer. Yes, I think that Ashley would advocate, and I subscribe to this as well, that we talk about it in a very matter-of-fact kind of way. So we don't introduce erotic sexual details per se, but we let them know that this is a special friend that we do have. And as you say, Tara, is a trusted person. And we don't necessarily go into the details of it, but we do introduce it in a way that it seems rather normal. And because if we go about it and are embarrassed or ashamed or make it covert, children pick up on that. They have a sense that something is not the same. It's not typical. But if we can go at it in a way that it is very much normalized, very often they look at it like it's not a big deal. And they have friends, we have friends. So the activity, the idea that it is sexual or romantically involved becomes less of a point of curiosity or embarrassment, that we might just be able to normalize it. But for the specifics of how we go about having those conversations and what is age appropriate, yes, I would defer to our associate, Ashley. She's in our Let's Talk Poly, which we invite all of you to join, please. And we can, either send you that link that shows you how, or we can put you in touch directly with her on how she went about, because she has some finer points. But by all means, talk about it in as much level of comfort that you have. But I would suggest and hope that we talk about it to normalize it.
Mm-hmm. I think you said, like you talked about, like kids talking about it at school. So I guess the question is, depends on what you tell the kids about those people and what they might share. And, kids say all kinds of things, especially when they're young, is that something that you're worried about, that they might share that with other kids?
Or more, they potentially becoming stigmatized by their friends, or like that.
Yeah, I think
if you go back in time, I don't know, a couple of decades, then the same would be going on for gay couples, right?
Mm-hmm.
Exactly, absolutely. And had we kept gay people in the closet, then they would still be in the closet. But at some point they said, no, it is perfectly acceptable and normal for me to be just as I am. And you will accept me as I am. And now we never think twice if we see somebody who's gay or somebody who's in a gay marriage. It is rather accepted. And I think the same thing will eventually become of people who are polyamorous or who are bisexual, that we are able to see it. We might not subscribe to the same ideology, but we are able to at least allow for it and eventually come to accept it. So if we continue to be embarrassed or ashamed by it, then it will be regarded in that way. But if we can accept it, then in time, others will accept it as viable as well.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Nog meer vragen?
Here, I'm going to drop the link to our group. I don't know if you can probably figure out a way to share it.
Okay, thank you so much. No more questions. Okay. Then I think,
also, Miguel, if anybody does have a question that they might think of later, or perhaps a little bit too shy to ask at the moment, which is understandable, then please feel free to reach out to us later.
Sure. Thank you so much. Well, Tara and André, I'm very sorry to tell you that we'll now have our official opening and our official toast on our polyamorous lifestyle, I must say. Which includes some bubbles, I think.
Bubbles.
Oh yeah, the bubbles. Okay.
Bubbles.
Just a small hint. But thank you so much. I think you deserve a round of applause from our audience.
And thank you.
Thank you so much, and have an awesome rest of the night. And hopefully we'll see you in person sometimes. Like, please send the invite. We'd love to come again.
We'd love that. We'd really love that. I think I speak for myself. I haven't heard everybody, but I've looked around, and I think many people are really into the story. That's why we gave this party in the first place, to let everybody know what is polyamory all about. And I think you explained it almost perfectly. I couldn't add anything to it. So thank you so much. Have a great evening, the both of you.
Thank you.
with your partners, and we hope to see you in half a year's time here in Holland.
Yay.
Okay.
We will. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Au revoir.